So when I talk about Islam, I do not talk about Muslims. I talk about the teachings of Muhammad. And that's, I think, an important distinction to make.
Certainly,
yeah.
Because a Muslim, being a person, could believe anything he pleases.
Yes, and my entire family is Muslim.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they too, within my family, practice the religion to varying degrees.
Yes.
You know, it's, yeah.
So your promise, speaking of your family, your betrothed to your cousin when you're born.
Yes.
When is this supposed to come to fruition?
When my parents started to notice that I was integrating into Western culture. It first started with fights over swim classes because that was something that my parents considered as a very decadent Western thing.
To go swimming? To
go swimming because of the clothing that you should, that you wear. And then theater classes at school, which my parents thought were just for prostitutes.
Yeah.
They watched Bollywood movies,
yeah.
but still, so every little freedom that everyone around me had, I had to fight for. And unfortunately, it was not just arguing. There was always a lot of violence in my family, and for just something that people don't understand, but I come from a culture where girls are killed over wearing a lipstick. It's something people can't wrap their head around.
Even hearing you say that, yeah. Probably people are going to hear girls are punished for wearing lipstick. Or
yeah, I mean, give you an example. Yeah. There was a young woman in Pakistan. Her name was Kandil Baloch. She was an online personality, and she dared to take a picture with a Muslim man and posted it online. And her brother thought that is very, very dishonorable, and he murdered her. Then he went to prison and was let go by the Pakistani government, because when an honor killing happens and the family of the victim forgives the perpetrator, then he is out. And in this case, it was the son of the same parent, so he said, we forgive him, so he's out. These are official laws in the country. People sometimes think, oh, this is just some few radicals that are doing this.
Yes.
No, these are, when you're raped, for example, I've interviewed women who were victims of gang rape in Pakistan, and many don't have the courage to even report the case. They drink poison and kill themselves. But in this case, this woman was so brave. She reported the case. And first they put them into prison because international media was there. When they were gone, let them all out. They're free because she has to bring 4 male witnesses to prove the rape. And if you can't, you go to prison for adultery.
Because even I, when I've read plenty of these cases, and I thought, it's just some radical or some tribal. When you hear about honor killings, you think,
so you should stop
this is
eating
extrajudicial.
Honey, and I'm going to explain why.
You're saying, no, this is embedded in the law, in the government.
And sometimes they have things on paper just to look good, so to get funded by Western governments, but it's actually not applied. So Pakistan prides itself, for example, with, we have laws against honor killings. Here it is. But that's how it looks like reality, like in this case. Sometimes governments, human rights activists will fight for certain people, and then, if you're lucky, you can get out of prison or so. But for a lot of people, there is no justice, and the victims suffer. I mean, I'm right now helping a girl. She's 14 years old, and she was raped by a Muslim man, one of the neighbors, while she was taking care of her baby sister. He just came in and did that to her. And what do these people do? They threaten the entire family and say, we are going to wipe you out if you report the case. And often they're scared to even file a report, because there have been cases like the case of poor Shazia Bashir. She was a 12-year-old girl who worked for a Muslim lawyer, and that man raped and tortured her to death. The mom went to report the case at a police station, and they said to her, can't be filed against the lawyer.
Because he's a lawyer.
Just, he's a lawyer. Yeah, that's it. I see this
Panel
every
truly
single
yours.
day in my
Here's
work.
a quick guide to
And
customize.
the victims are getting younger and younger. Recently, the victim we took care of was 6 years old. 6 years old, she was playing outside, and a Muslim from the neighborhood comes, grabs her, takes her to the fields, rapes her so brutally, and then leaves her there to die. She's bleeding and screaming in pain. And what happens? She's discovered and brought to the hospital. He has torn her uterus, and that poor child had to be in the hospital for 3 months just to. But he's ruined her. She's never going to have a normal life again, and that is what's happening to little girls, not just in Pakistan. I see it all the time in Afghanistan. I am a humanitarian, so sometimes people send me footage of child brides, and I recently saw this one, which was so horrifying. There's this little girl, she's tiny, and she's with her parents, and then comes in a stranger who is the age of her grandfather, and father and mother hand her over to the strangers. A few prayers are said, and she is trying to grab her parents to hold on to them, and they walk away, and this poor girl with a teeny tiny suitcase is now walking home with a stranger, and she's resisting, holds her hand, and she's just resisting because she doesn't want to go. But she's let go, and that little girl is just being sentenced to rape for a lifetime by her own parents. And you know what they say when people like I come and say, don't do that? Or liberal Muslims come and say, don't do that, this is not Islam. They confront you with the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad, his youngest wife was 6 when he was about 50. And that is the problem, that the role model Muhammad, that the Quran explicitly says is the greatest role model for all mankind, that has not been reformed. And
I suppose in that telling,
yes,
it can't be reformed, because in Christianity, where the man happens to be God and is a perfect man, then he really is the perfect role model.
Yes.
And you'll never go wrong by emulating Christ. But in the case of Muhammad, who is a false prophet, who committed all sorts of sins and foibles, if you say this is the man to emulate, then that's just going to be baked into the entire religion.
False prophet. I feel like we're going to die, Michael.
I hope not. Maybe we'll have to up my
We're going to be the first martyrs under Mamdani.
Yeah. I already planned to avoid New York after he got elected. So you've got this horrible problem where you're just seeing this episode after episode after episode, but then everyone's going to ask, why on earth would the parents give the little girl over to some old man? Because of their religiosity or something else?
Because they want to go to paradise. And then you include the economic situation in these very, very poor countries. And so it's a combination of a lot of factors. Then, if you can marry your girl off to someone who brings you a lot of money, and you are practicing sunnah, which is doing as the Prophet Muhammad did. So it's a win-win on both sides. So I have met child brides. In one of the first victims I helped, I have an organization, a foundation that helps these sorts of girls. And she was a child when she was married off in Afghanistan. And they always say the same stories. I mean, in her case, her parents were shot by the Taliban. And then she was married off to her nephew. Yes. And he had, I think it was her arm or something that was broken, but she was in pain when I met her. And she had converted to Christianity. And Germany wanted to send her back. That's the thing, you know, the Salafists, Hamas supporters, and all the other Islamists, they're allowed to stay.
Right.
And the girls that integrate, that take off their headscarves and even convert to Christianity, they have to go back. Anyways, I fought for her, and she was allowed to stay with her 2 little children that she had from that marriage. But when you listen to these girls and their stories, how many of the girls don't survive because they're so little? And I've heard of cases where the little girl actually became pregnant and then struggled for days to deliver a child and then died herself. Because the little bodies are not built for it.
Of course, of course.
And so this is what is happening, and I'm astonished about the human rights movement in the West that always says that they care so much about these Muslim women. No, they don't. They don't talk about this. No, they're protecting an ideology, and even people that are trying to point out that this is happening in the Muslim world are considered racist, bigots, Islamophobic monsters, like
right.
My friend, who is a journalist from Pakistan. She's an atheist. She was persecuted there. She came to Germany, and she said it is astonishing how the liberal left abandons all the human rights activists that come from these Muslim countries and point this out because they won't take it. It's unbelievable.
They've categorized Islam as an oppressed class.
Yeah.
Yes, and as the religion of peace, which, you've read the Quran much more deeply than I have. That was not the impression I got when I read the Quran. That it was. In fact, the reason I read the Quran was because all the liberals in the West kept saying it was a religion of peace. I was 14. I said, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
And I read it, and I said, yeah, it doesn't seem quite right.
Yes.
So then, you're betrothed to your cousin. You're taken in by the West and by freedom, and you want to do these radical, crazy things like go swimming or maybe play or something. And your parents don't like this very much.
No.
So then what happens? Well,
they discovered that I was holding hands with a boy at school. That was the only friendship I had with this young boy who was an exchange student from North Carolina. He was an Albanian Muslim who introduced me to Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre.
And I don't know what to make of this man.
It's how I learned English.
With Snoop Dogg?
Yeah.
There are so few isms in your diction. How odd.
No, that's my first impression of the U.S. was they're all black.
They smoke pot all the time, every day. Wow, that's an Albanian Muslim
from North
Carolina introducing you to Snoop Doggy Dogg.
Yes, and he had a friend from the Bronx who was there, Emmanuel. Maybe he watches this interview. He's going to know, hey, it's her.
Hello, Emmanuel. Hi.
And, when they discovered that I was beaten so badly by my mother.
By your mother?
Yes.
Not by your father. You would think
yes.
The father would be the disciplinarian.
No.
Than your mother.
It's mostly, unfortunately, the women. Because women lose face if their children do not grow up to live Islam according to tradition. And there's an entire society, parallel society within the Western communities that is watching the girls. That's what people don't realize. So there's a lot of pressure.
Huh.
And so I was just not allowed to belong to the world that I was growing up in. That was the problem. And and they considered the West as just very decadent. And I used to hear this from Muslims in my community. Look at the Christians, their brothels are full, their churches are empty, and when their parents are old, they dump them in old age homes. I mean, they're not wrong.
I hate to say the Muslims have a point, but they do have a point.
Yes, and they were just also afraid that I will become like that. And so what happened then was they said, we have a vacation planned in Pakistan. And I was scared of this. And when my mother beat me so brutally, I went into a shelter because the beatings happened so often that my teachers, who noticed that, said, this is not normal. You need to go to a shelter. And the social workers already knew me. And so I ended up there, and I told them I'm very scared to go back to Pakistan for vacation because my aunt had called and said that she was ready to have me as her daughter-in-law. And I was 16, and I was just a teenager at school, and now I was supposed to be a wife. I wasn't ready for that. But my parents, I mean, they're not the Taliban. My father is this extremely handsome, charming man. You know, they couldn't believe that they would do this to me.
Of course. And I think a lot of people watching probably think, especially when you see what's happened to New York and London, and Dearborn, Michigan, and all the rest, you think, well, look, obviously there's some kind of crazy guys living in caves with big beards and Casio watches, and those are the ones you have to really watch out for. But, you know, all the rest, it's probably just like some slightly different form of Christianity or something.
No. We weren't that. My brothers are highly educated. I mean, highly educated. And my mom doesn't even wear a headscarf. But still, these were the things that were going on in my family. And we went back. They sent me back because I was a minor. And my parents promised that they will not force me to marry my cousin. And so we went back to Pakistan. And when we arrived there, my passport was taken. I was literally locked in that little house of my cousin. And I was invited into a room where all my family members were sitting. And they said that they were now ready. My aunt said she was now ready to have me as her daughter-in-law. And I refused. And I was the first girl in the history of my family to refuse a marriage. And which was a great shame for my father. And I love my father. I still love my father. And I did not want to shame him, but I just could not live with a man that I did not love. I wanted to make my own choices. My mother beat me, and this time there was no one to call, no police, and no social services. You know, when I'm talking about beating, it's not just, I give you a slap. That's normal in my culture.
Yeah.
But my mom used to grab my hair and drag me through the apartment. And often when I went to school, I would lock myself in the toilet because I was so afraid of her. And this is how my school day started often. And in that case, I was now there. My family decided to leave me behind, and they went back to Austria. I had no idea what was going to happen to me. No passport, no phone, nothing. And then they decided, decisions were made for me. I was not allowed to make decisions. And they said they're going to go and visit a few schools with me. And the schools they visited weren't just normal schools where other children went. They were madrasas. Madrasa is a religious seminary, basically, or as some people call it, jihad factories, because these are the very places where the Taliban and other radical Muslim groups recruit the next generation of jihadis. The men come and learn and memorize the Quran to fight for Allah, and the women are there for submission, to learn submission. And there are over 30,000 of these madrasas just in Pakistan alone. And what you learn there, you learn nothing else but the Quran and the Hadith and how to enforce them with violence. When I arrived there, I noticed that there were no chairs, no beds, no desks, except a piece of carved wood on which the Quran was laid. And for almost 12 hours a day, we were just indoctrinated with the Quran, reciting the Quran and praying the namaz. And when there were girls that disobeyed, they put them in the courtyard and they would punish them so badly that they would scream, and we were forced to hear and watch it. And what did they achieve with that? If you treat one like this, none of the others are going to come and resist. It was a time of hell. I mean, I've described this hell in my book. And the only way for me to get out of that was to marry the cousin. And I thought, I will marry him, then I will go back to Austria, and then I will divorce him.
Right, right.
And that's exactly what happened. He came, or almost what happened, because it was actually then an engagement. My father came, and he couldn't afford to bring the entire family back, and said that we will do the marriage later, we will do the engagement. And so that's what happened. I came back to Austria after the engagement with the cousin and started my school. And that's where everything then changed when I met Joseph, the evangelical Christian.
This is not the Albanian Muslim from North Carolina.
No.
This is a different...
No. The Albanian Muslim, I mean, he was... That was just... Our relationship was listening to Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre and holding hands. That's what we did.
Weirdly
because we were
wholesome,
both Muslims, right?
Yeah.
So, but here and then I met Joseph, and he was like no other Christian I'd met before, because he actually brought his Bible to school. And I just said to him, "What happened to you?" And he said, "I've gotten to know Jesus." And I just thought, this guy used to stand in the smoker's corner with the guy who had dreadlocks, or maybe he's on drugs, I don't know, but he was very much on fire for Jesus. And he was trying to bring me the good news. And I was just thinking, no, this is bad news. It's going to get me killed.
This is definitely going to be bad news in my family, that's for sure.
Yeah. But once I told him about my problems with my family, and he said, "You must pray." And I said, 5 times a day I pray.
Yeah.
And he said, "Maybe you're praying to the wrong God, because obviously he's not hearing you." I love the evangelicals. They do that sort of thing,
They're very blunt.
We don't do that.
No.
We just, it's for us.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of kids, you get them to the Latin Mass.
Yes.
That's the extent that we do.
The Catholics, we're like a little more subtle sometimes. Yeah. But the evangelicals, they're so forthright, they just drop it all blunt as can be.
Drop the bomb.
Yes, they are.
And I just thought when he said that, that's section 295A in the Pakistani Penal Code. You would go to prison in my country for saying that. That's actually true.
Wow.
There's a blasphemy law that actually puts people into prison if they criticize Islam. And that's what they want to enforce in the West. That's why they're always whining about Islamophobia, because they're not used to criticism. Anyways, in my case, he then gave me a Bible. It was a gift close to Christmas, and Old Testament, New Testament, and a map of Israel. Like, seriously, I'm a Muslim.
Yeah.
You don't like the truth.
At least that page you have to take out if you're bringing it home.
Anyways, he did that, and then I was sitting on my bed. My parents were now forcing me to sign the marriage certificate so that I'm officially married, and my cousin could come to Austria. And so there were battles about this, and I was praying to Allah to help me, and nothing happened. And that one night, I took the Bible home, and it was an incalculable risk for me to take it home. But I'm a risk taker for the truth, so I did. And that night I said, who are you? Buddha, Allah, Krishna, Jesus. And so my gaze fell on the Bible that Joseph gave me. And I had no idea where to start, because most Muslims don't. We have weird ideas about Christianity. I have a friend, her mom is an Indian Muslim. And she was saying, you know, the Christians, they had the Old Testament. It was too difficult, so they found the new one, so that their women can wear bikini and not be guilty about it. It's funny, but that sort of talk is very common at Muslim dinner tables.
Wow. Well, it's amazing, though, because the New Testament was written in the 1st century A.D., and when was the bikini invented? 1945 or something like that? I don't know. Okay. There was a gap in there. But
I know, but
took a while.
This is the sort of thing. So I was, holding this book in my hand, God, who are you? And I just randomly opened the Bible. And the first sentence I read was, whoever searches me with a pure heart will find me. Whoa. There was an answer. And
that happens. People, it happens.
Yes.
I don't mean to make it sound like a magic trick or something, because it's not. But that happens. People just open the Bible, or they look over, and it just happens to be on a page with exactly
the same.
Exactly what you need to see.
And then I started to do what Joseph told me. Read the New Testament. So I started to read. And I did what a lot of Muslims do. I started to compare Muhammad and Jesus. And I was especially struck by the story of Mary Magdalene. Because when the mob was eager to execute her, I just saw myself in her, with my entire family pressuring me. And I saw the women of my country in Mary Magdalene. And
I have to interrupt you. This is one of this is just kind of what we were talking about. I woke up today. I looked at my calendar, and someone had added a meeting with a news organization because they wanted me to talk about Mary Magdalene. And I haven't thought about Mary Magdalene in I can't tell you how long. And I actually wrote to my publicist. I said, do I need to know more about, I'm not an expert on Mary Magdalene. She said, no, I just want to do the meeting. I have this whole meeting about this whole project about Mary Magdalene. I have no idea where this came from. It just appeared on my calendar. I didn't think about it afterward. And then you say that. That's what happens, though. That does that kind of thing happens.
I think Mary Magdalene maybe sent me. Should I speak to him, please?
Yeah, maybe.
No, I started to make mental comparisons between Muhammad and Jesus. An adulterous woman is brought to Muhammad, stoning for the woman. The same is brought to Jesus, mercy. Muhammad said, kill the infidels wherever you find them. And Jesus says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Muhammad said, I have been commanded to fight against all people until they testify that Muhammad is the messenger. And Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. Muhammad participated in over 27 battles personally as a warlord. And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. I mean, I could, continue with this list because there is so much to say. And actually, if people are asking, where is this actually written? I've pointed that all out. The only sources I'm using in this interview are the sources that are recognized as valid in classical Islamic theology. So I was most fascinated by Jesus, and I wanted to know more about him. And there was this movie that was aired at Easter about Jesus. And when the crucifixion came, my parents turned it off. I wanted to see why someone would sacrifice his life for his broken creatures. Because Allah is not interested in the brokenness of his creatures. You cannot have a relationship with him. You follow his rules. So I wanted to know about him, so I ventured out to the city and to buy a copy. And everywhere I went, I was just met with snorts and chuckles. I think they were just like, who is this brown woman with an Austrian accent pointing at Jesus movie? What is this?
Almost as crazy as an Albanian Bosnian from North Carolina, yes.
And so I was going everywhere and I wasn't succeeding. And then I remembered something. Joseph used to say, Jesus lives and he loves you. And I said, hey, Jesus, if you're alive, please help me find this movie. And when my last attempt was unsuccessful, I just gave up, sat into the tram, and I just thought, even Jesus can't help me. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice, you're very pretty, aren't you a singer? And it was a man sitting across of me, and I just went, nah, I don't need that now.
Yeah. Well, I've heard this line before, yeah.
And he said, I don't know, Fräulein, which is lady,
yeah.
Fräulein, but I just have this feeling that I must give you something. And I said sarcastically, well, it's Christmas time, give me a gift.
Yeah.
And he just handed me this leaflet and then went off the tram. And I look at it and it says, call this hotline and receive one Jesus movie for free. And I just went, this is very interesting. I felt I was followed in my thoughts by someone, something that I wasn't used to. And while I was excited to have these little experiences, my head was speaking to me with reason. Your parents are not even happy that you don't want to marry your cousin. What are they going to say if you say, I actually want to exchange Muhammad for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was going home, I just thought, I will just practice the faith secretly. Because I couldn't give up my family. That was the most important thing to me. And that night, of course, I stumbled upon the verses where Christ says, whoever loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. So Jesus was a God of challenge, either all or nothing.
Yeah.
And it is for a lot of Muslims, it's not just a change of religion. You absolutely lose everything. You lose your family, you lose your friends, your community, and your identity. It's like suicide, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Jesus was asking me to die so that I can become like him. And that's the only thing that drove me to accept him, because I wanted to be like him. And there is so much to say, but I'm going to make it short. I always had this inner voice within me, strangely, even though Joseph was a evangelical, to go to the Catholic Church. The man on the cross was there. And I always followed him. So I went to this big cathedral in Linz and saw this holy water, and I thought, oh, it's some sort of ritual, so I was just making this weird sign.
Look around, something.
Making these weird sounds, and this young man comes and, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I have a meeting with the Pope today. He just looked at me going, the Pope's not here, but he brought me to the priest. And I tell the Catholic priest about my newfound love in Jesus Christ and the things that I was experiencing. And he said to me, it could be that Muhammad was a prophet too. We don't know.
The priest said this? This is in Austria?
This is in Austria.
Yeah.
This is the time where St. John Paul had kissed the Quran and people wanted to follow.
Yeah.
So all religions were a way to God. And I experienced that firsthand. So he let me go. He didn't tell me that I needed catechism. He didn't say, you should come and if there's any problem, come to my church and I'll give you a room if you have to flee. Nothing like that. He sent me home. And then I saw a nun. She had, she was properly suited and booted. She was on her bike and I made her stop. I was on fire for Jesus. I needed someone to speak with me. So she stopped. And very sweet. Catholic sisters are always so extremely sweet. Yeah. I said, I believe in the same as you. And she didn't know what to do. And then she said, I was a Muslim. I wanted her to be happy.
Yeah.
And she said, all religions are a way to God.
Oh, my goodness.
Believe deeply in what we believe. And I just thought, if I believe deeply as a Muslim that killing an infidel is going to get me to heaven, is that a way to God?
How is that the way to go? This is, as you describe, I'm not even terrible. I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised by these experiences, especially in Austria and Germany. But truly, this is one of the great arguments. Hilaire Belloc made the point. The proof that the Catholic Church is divinely instituted is that if it weren't, bad clergy would have destroyed it 2,000 years ago. Unbelievable.
I love Hilaire Belloc. They've thrown him out somehow.
Yeah.
But, I loved Hilaire Belloc. Yeah, anyways, but so I ended up back in the evangelical church, even though I always had this inner longing to go to the Catholic Church, but no one wanted me there. So the evangelicals took great care of me.
Yeah.
I mean, they even study Islam just for Muslim converts, just to go through what are the challenges they have. So they are most eager to accept converts. But to make a long story short,
don't make it too short. We've got...
there's so much to say. I've written 3 books. Yeah. 2 bestsellers, by the way. About Sharia.
I'm not surprised. Right now, go to hallow.com/Knowles. Believe it or not, the Christmas season is right around the corner. As much as we might like to avoid the chaos, the shopping, the wrapping paper, the half-packed suitcases by the door, we cannot. The best thing we can do is lean into the season and to do it right, to rediscover peace and purpose in the midst of all the noise. Often, Advent becomes a mere checklist. Gifts, travel plans, dinners, decorations, but it's worth asking, why do we have so much to do? What is all of this for? Well, that's one reason I'm very excited about my friends over at Hallow. This Advent, Hallow is leading a powerful challenge called Pray 25, Be Still. It's an invitation to step out of the modern frenzy and enter into the real story of Christmas, one that was anything but calm or comfortable. Think about it. A young mother whose life had just been upended, a good man mocked and misunderstood, and a tyrant seeking to kill their child. And yet, they found peace in the midst of it all. Through Hallow's Pray 25 Advent Challenge, you will meditate on Psalm 46. Be still and know that I am God. Join Jonathan Rumi, Chris Pratt, Sister Miriam James, Gwen Stefani, and more throughout this season. You will hear excerpts from The Read of God, an incredible book by a really remarkable woman, and The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry is a way to experience the Nativity not as a sentimental scene, but as a moment of profound stillness and divine order in a broken world. Before you get lost in wrapping paper and travel plans, take time this Advent to be still. Center your days on prayer, on silence, on the peace that only Christ can bring. You can get 3 months free of Hallow right now, hallow.com/Knowles. Get 3 months free of the #1 prayer app.
When my mom pressured me to sign the marriage certificate again, I had accepted Jesus in my heart. And she asked me to sign it. I said no, because I knew the breakup was coming. I said, God does not want that. She was completely perplexed. What God, So she took my clothing, packed it in a bag, threw it out, and spat on me and said, if I would have known that you would become like this, I would have killed you when you were an infant. And so I was standing in front of I was standing, and I didn't even have the strength to call the elevator because I was just shaking. I was so weak. And I didn't know where to go, and I was just on the street. And I ended up in the homeless shelter for young adults. And I was probably the first Austrian to be homeless for Jesus.
At least a few centuries, yeah.
I want to imitate Christ in all the different forms in his passion. So that was one.
Yeah, of course.
And so I ended up in this homeless shelter. And I've actually recently written to that shelter. I love those people that help me there. Yeah. And they then recognized, because they knew me from before, that it was all a lie and deception, what they had received from my parents before. The thing is, Michael, this is very normal. It's going to sound very horrible, and not all Muslims do that. But it was very, very normal for us Muslims to lie to non-believers because it wasn't considered a sin. And I would have friends that invite the Christians over who were best friends with them. And the Christians would go home singing, oh, that was so nice, and the hospitality of Muslims. And then what did we do? We separated their dishes, prayed the Muslim prayer over it because they're impure. And the Quran itself in Surah 5 says that a Muslim and a Christian cannot be friends. So if you have friendships, they have to be shallow friendships, never loyalty, especially in hard times when Islam's honor is at stake. I mean, that was normal. That's what we believed. Everyone believed that. So, and I think my parents saw in those social workers just a bunch of pig-eating infidels. That's how I perceived it. And you can lie to infidels, and that's what they did. And when I told them the whole story and that I had converted to Christianity, and they helped me to find an apartment. And the apartment happened to be right in front of a police station because God knew what was coming. Yeah. Providence. Because when my parents found out, they called me home. And there in that living room of my parents, my mother and my father and a Muslim scholarly person was there. And my cousin from Pakistan. They had invited him to come over. And you know how they did that? They adopted him as their son.
To get around the immigration visa.
Yes. So he was adopted. And by a liberal lawyer who fights for the rights of refugees, he helped them to get him into the country. So he was there, and the Muslim scholar, he folded his hands, said, you know what happens in Islam when you leave the religion. And I knew what happens. It's the death penalty. But I was just thinking, I'm living in Linz. How are they going to do that in Linz?
Yeah.
And he just said to me, you know, normally you get 3 days. That's Sharia law. You get 3 days.
To recant.
Yeah. So you can, and it's not just persuading the convert into accepting Islam again. No, it's torturing the convert so that he can become Muslim again. And if they don't, then you kill them. And that's not just a radical interpretation. That's, as I said, teaching of the Prophet Muhammad. And in my case, he said, we give you 2 weeks to come back. And otherwise, please don't let us do what we have to do otherwise. And I was just frozen because my family had just sentenced me to death in Linz.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I called a friend who was a non-practicing Tunisian man. So they just did this to me. And he said, you need to go to the police. But before I did that, I called Joseph. But Joseph, when I told him about the threats, his family was scared.
Yeah.
He didn't come. Because I'm going to come and help, and then all of a sudden he wasn't there. Too scared. So I ended up at the police station, told them the entire story. The policeman first said, why don't you convert back to Islam? I mean, what does it matter what religion you have, right?
Yeah, it's all fake anyway.
Yeah. So why don't you convert back to Islam? Then I told him everything that has happened, and then he went from one extreme to the other extreme, which was he needs to arrest my father because of all the violations.
Yeah.
But I didn't want him to arrest me. I started to cry. Then they called a psychologist because they were scared that I may be suicidal. That's the condition that I was in.
Yeah, of course.
And the psychologist evaluated me and said she's psychologically completely fine. But what they couldn't understand was that it wasn't just either being afraid of my parents or loving my parents. It was both.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to harm my parents. I just wanted them to protect me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one day police starts investigating. Then I receive a letter. It's about your husband. And I just went, wait, I haven't married.
Yeah.
And turns out my father signed the marriage certificate himself. And all of a sudden I was married. But according to the world that he comes from, he wasn't doing anything wrong. Because in many cases, the bride doesn't even have to be present. It's just the man in the family who can sign for her. And then she's married. That's what he did in Austria. And by the way, I know of girls who've had that happen to them in Brooklyn and other places in the U.S. This is not just a European thing, okay? This is happening here. I have met victims in the U.S. who are going through similar things. And anyways, I went against that, and then my cousin called me and said, you're not going to experience this day anymore. And he hung up. And I knew he was coming for me. That day I left Linz. I came to Vienna. And in Vienna, whenever I started new jobs, I was scared that my family would find me and then terrorize me, because that's what had happened before. Whenever I started to work somewhere, my parents would come there, create a scene, and then I was let go.
Right.
And so I wasn't sure what to do. And I had a friend who was a model. He said, "Oh, I know this photographer and that photographer. I'm sure he's gonna do some amazing pictures, and you can earn some money." And so I did. And then I said, "Nah, I don't want to be seen like this by my father, and it's gonna degrade his honor." So I did a few shots that I should have never done. but during that time, I met a priest that came to a press conference because I decided to write down my story by the persuasion of a policeman, former policeman. So you should write this down. Because he first didn't believe me when I told him the story, and then all of so he said, and he had a publishing agency. It's a crazy story that he himself has. He was a policeman that turned a millionaire, and then whatever he did, and then
even if your story is hard to believe,
yeah, that's true.
A policeman becoming a millionaire publishing mogul is but these things happen. These things.
He exists, so
yeah.
And so the story came out, and at one of my at my press conference, there was a priest. I love him, Rudy.
Yeah.
Rudy was amazing, and he was a Catholic priest, and he just sat there and looked at me. He said, when you were speaking about Christ to the press, it felt like you were describing the sun to a bunch of blind men. And I was so grateful that finally there's a Catholic. And I said, I want to be Catholic.
I want to be Catholic. But the priests and nuns I meet in Central Europe, they don't seem to want to do anything. Yeah,
so he baptized me, but he never told me that I need to be confirmed. And that's something that happens, that sometimes when people see the story that you risked your life for Jesus Christ, and now you don't need catechism. But the problem is that the catechism is not supernaturally infused in you. You still need that.
Yes.
So I was just begging these people, please teach me more. Please. And he says, yeah, no, you don't.
No, it's a religion. You actually have to learn things, actually,
Problem was that my parents sued me for defamation, and then I had to prove the entire story before court. Then the court, and my witnesses were all scared.
Of course.
Even the social workers would not testify because they were scared that my parents would come and create a scene. So they left everything written to the judge, which was most helpful.
At least they did that.
Yes. No, I mean, my social workers, God bless them, they were amazing. And the court ruled in my favor, but it went on for years, and my parents used to find me wherever I moved to. So I then became ambassador for a women's rights organization in Germany. My book was then published in Germany, and it was quite successful. So I came there, and there was this friend of mine. He said, here is a young woman. She's in desperate need of help, and you're a public person. Maybe you can help her. And that was the child bride that I was speaking about from Afghanistan. And I fought for her case, and she was allowed to stay in Germany, and it encouraged me so much. And I established my foundation in Hamburg in 2006 So Sabatino / Friends of the Passion was established there, and we have helped thousands of victims of not just forced marriages, but especially people who are suffering persecution for believing in Jesus Christ. That is our main duty as a foundation, to help those people. And this is also what I spoke about publicly. And once I was invited by a Catholic priest, I was baptized, but went back to the Catholic evangelicals because they were the only ones taking care of me.
Would teach you things and bring you in.
Yeah. So during that time, the pastor used to speak, we are like the early church. But I always felt that there was something missing. And I think what it was, and I had visited mega churches in the U.S. I went to Hillsong, and I went to, and they're lovely. I mean, amazing people.
The people are great.
Yeah, the people are great, but there was something lacking. And I think it was the cross. The cross that had followed me from the very beginning. I stepped into Austria. And the cross was there at the evangelicals, but Jesus wasn't suffering on it. And I asked the pastor one day, I said, where is he? He said, well, he's not there. He is risen. And I said to him, but he was just crucified in Syria, so he's still there. And he didn't know what I meant. ISIS had just crucified people for not fasting during Ramadan. That's what I meant. And I was interviewing Christians who had fled the Islamic State. It was 2014. And one of the young men that I helped had testified to the murder of Coptic Christians. And that's what I was speaking about when I said Christ is still there. And God knew that the German church is a wilderness for Muslim converts, and whoever seeks him with a pure heart finds him. And he started to send me the saints. And the first one to reach me from across the centuries was Saint Augustine. Saint Augustine, a journalist from the Spiegel magazine, had come to interview me and did a big portrait about me. And I thought he's going to be super nice, but he came out with this article, God's Supermodel.
God's Supermodel. It's flattering, I guess.
Yeah, the thing is, no one takes you seriously if you do that, but it's okay. So he did that, but he was a great devotee to St. Augustine. Even at Spiegel, you have these people, right?
That's shocking.
That's shocking.
Absolutely shocking.
He's not there anymore, but it's probably the most leftist magazine in Germany. But good for them, they did it. And I must say the German media has treated me very well. Can't complain about that. So he quoted him, and I was fascinated by it, and I started to read St. Augustine. And he was constantly talking about the Catholic Church. And I just went, wait a minute, I need to find out, when did this begin?
You're right.
And I went to the church library of the Church Fathers. And there I discovered the man of my life, Ignatius of Antioch.
He's a good one. He is a good one.
My goodness, when he says these words, I am in love with suffering. And I was like, this guy has the same God. And he spoke about the Catholic Church in the first century. And I started to go to the Catholic Mass. I didn't know what to do, but I remember someone saying, well, you have to go to confession. So I went into the box,
Yeah.
said hello, don't know what to do. It was the most interesting experience for that priest. And then I went to Mass. And there is something that I experienced at that Mass that was beyond any explanation in words. And I believe that all those sorts of experiences should remain between God and the soul.
And often for those experiences, even if you try to put it into words, it kind of fails. They tend to have an ineffable quality to them.
My spiritual director actually wanted me to write this down, and I started, and I wrote it down. It's like, no, throw it out. and then, you know, I'm a devotee to St. John of the Cross.
Yeah.
And St. John of the Cross says it very clearly that it's not even necessary to explain it, because the spiritual effect that God wants to create is created without you having the explanation or, you know, knowing how to describe. So since then, I am Catholic, and during that time, I was invited. See, this is how providence works. By a priest. He has this teeny tiny little parish of the traditional Latin Mass order. He invited me to come and speak about persecuted Christians. And he was shocked that I came. He said, you know, I have a really small church and you're very famous in Germany, so why did you come? And I, well, not to speak, but to seek. Yeah. And he introduced me to the bishop, and I was then confirmed, finally, 10 years after being baptized, into the Catholic Church. And yeah, during that time, 2015 and 14 and 15, that was the time of the huge wave of immigration into Germany.
Right.
And people like me were not safe anymore, because millions and millions of new Muslim immigrants came. At one of my lectures, bearded Salafists showed up, and when they became aggressive, security literally rushed me out of the lecture, and the next day had to be canceled because the organizers no longer felt safe. I saw Muslim men following me to church, watching me at the train stations, and I was taken into police protection. Had been for a while, because my parents had again discovered where I lived in Germany. And so I was in under police protection for many, many years. And I was a nightmare case for my police protection officer. Greetings to him. Because I had this great desire to help the persecuted Christians, but I had left Pakistan as a Muslim. I wanted to hear the sorrows of that community. And the only way you can do that is by being with them, listening to them. And how do I do that? I would have to go back to Pakistan. And what would happen to me in Pakistan if anyone finds me? I would be either imprisoned under Section 295 for blasphemy, or the mob would kill me. But I knew it was the will of God, because it was my duty to help the persecuted. This is how I discovered the will of God. What is my duty? But I was scared. And so, when I read the story of Joshua in the Bible, who was scared of the giants, even though he had an order to go. It's like, who is my giant? The jihadis?
Yeah.
am I going to go? I thought, if it's the will of God, for whom I have given up the most precious thing in my life, which was my family, then I will go. And so, I actually went to Pakistan.
Not the loveliest vacation, I imagine. That's astounding. But really, you can make a sort of joke, but it's crazy.
Yeah, I went not just to Pakistan. I went to the most dangerous area within Pakistan. And my driver was someone from Peshawar. I was there with a human rights organization, and there were Pakistanis themselves, and one of them was a convert from Islam who had spent years in prison himself, and is sort of an evangelical pastor, and probably the most courageous man I've met. And he had organized this driver, and I just said, oh my gosh, how can you have a Muslim from Peshawar driving us throughout this whole journey? I mean, that's the stronghold of the Taliban in Pakistan. How do you know he's not one of them? And he said, well, where we are going, you need someone like that to even get through. And I just went, where are you taking me? Well, where the victims are. And then when we arrived there, I always had armed men with me. And when we arrived there, even at those so-called hotels, you would have these men with Kalashnikovs and turbans standing there. It was terrifying. And there was an area where the victims would all meet to speak with me. And then the bodyguard came and said, they have killed one of the victims. And I don't know the whole story of her. I just know I was terrified.
Of course.
I said, I'm not going. I want to go back to
Austria, Germany.
Yeah. And then he said to me, think of Queen Esther. God called her to save her people. And she was scared, and what did she do? And I said, well, she went because of Mordechai, who encouraged her. And he said, I'm your Mordechai, and I want to encourage you to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Morty. I'll be there.
So I read the story of Queen Esther, who said, if I die, I die, but I will fulfill the will of God, basically. And so I did. And to this day, I'm so glad that I did. Because out of that trip, something amazing has been established. We have Operation Moses, which is the freeing of slaves. Pakistan still has slavery. And many of the slaves are Christians. So we basically free slaves. And we help victims that are accused of blasphemy laws. We help bringing back Christian girls that have been abducted and forcefully converted to Islam. Pakistan, every year there are about 1,000 Christian and Hindu girls that are abducted and forcefully converted to Islam. And this is what we do. But in my case, the journey wasn't over, because on that trip, we were followed by an Islamist organization. And at one time, a dead body was thrown on my car to make us stop. And I just thought, this is the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is actually how I start my book. And it was a long night, and I described all the details in my book. And I wanted to visit people in prison as well. But then, after this, the people that had organized the trip, they said, the person that needs the most help right now is you. You must leave the country.
When they start throwing dead bodies on your car, that is a strong sign that time's up.
Yes. And I miraculously survived. And my police officer, whenever I even started to say, God, I know. You're God. He thought it was horribly imprudent for me to go there.
Imprudent. That's a very diplomatic way to put it, I think.
I think the most prudent thing is the will of God.
Hmm?
And if that will leads you to risk your life, then it's still the most prudent thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's why I did it. And we have saved countless lives since then, and we still do. So we don't advertise our work. So, by the way, if you don't find, like, where is that? We don't.
You have to be a little undercover, I imagine, in that line of work.
Yes.
It's a very important point that you made.
Yeah.
That doing the will of God is always the prudent thing.
Yeah.
You know, people are going to think that's really weird, but I think a lot of people have this experience sometimes. I certainly have it myself, where you're praying, and you pray that something that you want will happen. But you think, well, you know, if it's your will, God, or I really hope such and such doesn't happen. Please don't let this happen. Please don't allow the consequence of this action to come, whatever it is. And you think, I feel like God might be calling me to do one thing, but I really don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then, really, one must conclude, even just as a matter of reason, whatever God wants is best.
Yes.
He knows better than you do.
Yes.
And He wills better than you do, and He loves better than you do.
Yes.
So so long as we're talking about the real God, you know, who is the divine logos of the universe, the love that moves the sun and the other stars, go with Him. That's actually the practical, prudent thing to do, because He's right.
Yes. Yes. But, you know, it's not just that the danger was now in Pakistan. We had invited and imported the danger of radical Islam into the West through all that immigration, and didn't just have all these bearded Salafists show up at my lecture. Now I had, literally when I went to church and I had a public event, there were armed guards standing in front of the church while I was at Mass because I had to have them there. They were following me. And so I took the whole thing online, you know, because the public appearances became very dangerous. I took the whole thing online. And during that time, we received so much attention from the radical Muslim scene because I exposed the Quran. I'm a madrasa child. They can speak about all this nonsense to Christians who have absolutely no clue. You know, they can tell them anything. They have never read their own scriptures. And, you know, why should they know anything about Islam?
Right.
So the problem was then they started to send us death threats. And the last one that we received in Arabic was, watch your head. Have your house guarded, and watch your head and have your house guarded by police. And this is when the authorities started to investigate because they were saying that they are going to put the pictures of the channel on all European jihadi sites. And what is the picture of the channel? That's me and another ex-Muslim and some people from the Middle East. We did that. They're you know, they know what it looks like when Sharia takes place, right? And so with them, I had this channel, but even that was not safe anymore. And so I fled Germany and I came to the land of liberty, America.